It was Halloween night, the kind of crisp, orange-lit evening that feels both magical and unsettling. The streets of my small town were alive with costumed kids and parents dragging wagons full of candy. I was 22 at the time, freshly out of college and back home for a few months before moving to another city for work. My little sister Ellie was 9, and this was the first year my parents trusted me to take her trick-or-treating alone. It was supposed to be a simple night. Candy, laughter, and a few pictures for Mom. Instead, it's a night that still wakes me up shaking, because what we saw on Willow Lane wasn't a prank or a Halloween setup. It was real. Ellie was dressed as a vampire, fake fangs, red lipstick, the works. I threw on a hoodie and called myself a lazy skeleton, because of the printed bones on the sleeves. It was already dark by the time we left. Jack-o'-lanterns glowed on porches and the air smelled like wet leaves and cheap candle wax. We hit the usual houses on our street. Families we knew, familiar decorations, a dad with a fake chainsaw pretending to chase kids. Everything was fine, normal, until Ellie pointed toward the next block and said, "Let's go down there. I heard there's a house giving out full-size candy bars." She was talking about Willow Lane, a short cul-de-sac that curved behind the woods. The street always gave me weird vibes, too quiet, too few lights, but I didn't want to be the overprotective brother. "All right," I said. "Let's go score some king-size Snickers." As soon as we turned onto Willow Lane, the noise from the rest of the neighborhood faded. No laughter, no other kids, just the crunch of our feet on the pavement and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. Half the houses were dark. No porch lights, no pumpkins, nothing. The only one still lit up was the last house at the end of the cul-de-sac. An old 2-story Victorian with white siding and a red door. The porch light was glowing, and a single jack-o'-lantern flickered on the steps. "There," Ellie whispered excitedly. "Told you!" She ran ahead before I could stop her. The closer I got, the stranger it felt. The air was colder around that house, like walking into a refrigerator. And even though the porch light was on, the windows were pitch black like mirrors. No music, no laughter, just that one pumpkin, smiling with sharp, uneven teeth. Ellie was already knocking on the door, bouncing on her heels. I jogged up behind her, ready to say thank you to whoever answered. But when the door opened, there was no one there, just the empty hallway behind it, lit by a dim yellow light. Ellie giggled nervously. "Maybe it's like a motion thing, like one of those scare houses." I looked inside. The wallpaper was peeling, and the air smelled like something sour. Old wood and wet earth. Then a voice from deeper inside said, "Come in." "The candy's in the bowl." It was a woman's voice, soft, slow, almost like a whisper. I froze. Every instinct told me not to move. Ellie, though, didn't hesitate. "See, I told you," she said and stepped through the door. "Ellie, wait." I followed her inside. The door closed behind me on its own with a heavy click. The hallway stretched ahead, narrow and dimly lit by a flickering bulb. There was indeed a small wooden table near the stairs, and on it sat a big orange bowl full of candy. Cheap brands, the kind you buy last minute from the dollar store. "Thank you," Ellie chirped, reaching for a handful. That's when I saw it. There were already small teeth marks in every piece of candy, like someone had bitten into them and then wrapped them back up. I grabbed Ellie's hand. "Don't touch that. We're leaving." Her face fell, but before she could complain, something creaked upstairs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. "Thump, thump, thump," Ellie whispered. "Is that the lady?" "Maybe," I said. "We're gonna thank her and go, okay?" We backed toward the door, but before I reached for the knob, I heard that same voice again. Closer this time, right above us. "You shouldn't be here." I looked up. The ceiling above the hallway had an opening, a square hatch to the attic, and something was moving inside the darkness of that opening. A hand. Thin, pale. The nails were dark red, long and sharp like claws. It gripped the edge of the hatch and started pulling down the old wooden ladder. The voice came again, only now it sounded wrong. Like two people talking at once. "Don't go yet. We haven't had visitors in so long." I yanked Ellie's arm and pulled her toward the door, but the handle wouldn't turn. It was locked. Not just locked, nailed tight like it was part of the wall. Ellie started crying. "I want to go home." I pounded on the door. "Hey, let us out." From above, the ladder creaked as something began to climb down. The bulb overhead flickered. For a split second, the figure was visible. A woman in an old-fashioned black dress, her hair hanging over her face like wet strings. Her arms were too long, her fingers brushing the floor before her feet even touched it. And then the light went out completely. Ellie screamed. I dragged her backward, fumbling for my phone flashlight. When the beam finally came on, the hallway was empty again. The ladder was gone. The bowl of candy had spilled over, and the wrappers were moving slightly as if something had just crawled under them. That was all it took. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I kicked the door with everything I had, once, twice, until the frame splintered and we fell through onto the porch. We sprinted down the street, not looking back until we hit the next block where other kids were still trick-or-treating. When I finally turned, the house looked dark again. The porch light was off. The pumpkin wasn't lit. It was like no one had ever been there. Later that night, after Ellie was in bed, I tried to tell my parents what happened. They didn't believe me, of course. My dad even laughed, said the old Miller place had been empty for years, ever since the fire. What fire? I asked. He looked at me strangely. You don't remember? It was before you left for college. Old woman named Beatrice Miller lived there. She burned herself inside. Whole thing nearly went up. They said she was not right in the head. He shrugged it off. That house is condemned. You must have gone to the wrong one. I didn't argue. But later that night, when I couldn't sleep, I checked Google Maps on my phone. There was no house listed at that address. Just an empty lot. 2 nights later, Ellie woke up screaming. When I ran to her room, she pointed at her trick-or-treat bag on the floor. It was tipped over, and one of the candies from the bowl was lying beside her bed, half unwrapped. I didn't put that there, she said, crying. I threw it away, double-bagged it, and tossed it in the outside bin. But sometimes, when it's quiet at night, I swear I can still hear that voice. Faint, far away, whispering, "Come in." The candy's in the bowl. It's been 8 years since I worked at that gas station. But sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm back there. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint smell of gasoline, and the sound of the cold October wind rattling the window panes. I used to work the graveyard shift at a small gas station off exit 46, somewhere between Pennsylvania and New York. It was one of those places that barely saw traffic after midnight, just truckers, lost travelers, or the kind of people you hoped would never come inside. I was 24 at the time, broke and just grateful to have a paycheck. I thought it would be boring. I was wrong, because what happened on Halloween night that year still makes me question what's real. The shift started like any other. I clocked in at 10 p.m., grabbed a cup of burnt coffee, and started stocking the shelves. The station sat alone off the highway. No other buildings nearby, just open fields and woods that seemed to swallow the road. By 11:30, things were dead quiet. Not a single car for miles. I was half dozing behind the counter when I heard the chime of the door. Ding. A man walked in, tall, wearing a dark raincoat and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't say anything, just went straight to the back cooler. I remember thinking it was strange because he never made eye contact. He moved too slowly, like he was studying the place. After a minute, he came up to the counter with a single bottle of water. That all? I asked. He nodded, still not looking at me. His hands were trembling slightly as he handed me a $5 bill. When I looked down to give him change, I noticed something that froze me. His fingers were covered in what looked like dried mud, or maybe blood. I tried to stay calm. You okay, man?" I asked. He finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, not from tiredness, but like someone who hadn't blinked in hours. Then he smiled. A slow, unnatural grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Do you ever see things out there?" he asked softly. "On the road, I mean." I stared at him. "Things?" he nodded. "Shapes, faces, people standing where there shouldn't be anyone." I forced a small laugh. "Can't say that I have." He stared for a moment longer, then turned and walked out, leaving the bottle of water behind. When the door shut, I realized my heart was pounding. I locked the door after him, thinking maybe he was drunk or on something. Then I noticed something else. On the counter, beside the bottle, was a small Polaroid photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was blurry, but it showed a car parked at the gas station, my gas station. And standing beside it was me, only the me in the picture wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at something behind him, something dark and human-shaped. I told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe someone was messing with me, but I couldn't shake the unease, so I checked the security cameras. That's when my stomach dropped. At 11:47 p.m., the camera showed the man entering the store, exactly as I remembered. But when he turned to the cooler, something was off. Behind him, just for a second, there was a tall shadow in the glass door reflection. It looked like a person, except it was completely black with no features. No face, just absence. And when he walked out, the shadow stayed behind, standing in the corner near the chip aisle. Then the feed glitched. I ran a full circuit of the store. Every aisle, every corner, nothing. But when I came back to the counter, something was different. The bottle of water that man had left. It was open now, on and half empty. And sitting next to it was another Polaroid. This one showed the same scene as before, but closer, like whoever took it was standing just outside the window. My reflection was still there, but the dark shape behind me was leaning closer, almost over my shoulder. I locked myself in the back office and called my boss. No answer. Then I called the police. They said they'd send a patrol, but it might be a while. I was 40 miles from the nearest town. I stayed in that office for what felt like an hour, watching the security monitor. Every few minutes the cameras would flicker, and that same black shadow would appear somewhere else. One frame near the door, another near the shelves each time it got closer. At 1:12 a.m. the power went out. Total darkness except for the emergency light over the exit. The only sound was the faint, steady knock coming from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Whoever, me or whatever one was outside wasn't trying to come in. It was knocking slowly like it wanted me to answer. Then the sound moved. From the front door, to the side window, to the back door, each time. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed the flashlight and crept out of the office, trying to see if anyone was outside. The glass was fogged from the cold, but I could just make out a tall silhouette standing a few feet away. "Hey," I shouted. "I called the cops." No response. Then from somewhere in the dark, a voice whispered, low and calm like it was right behind me. "Don't look away." I spun around. Nothing. But in the reflection of the freezer glass, I saw movement. A long black arm stretching from the shadows, reaching toward me. I bolted back to the office and slammed the door. The knocking started again, louder now, faster. It was coming from everywhere at once. Walls, ceiling, floor. The whole building seemed to shake. Then silence. Complete, unnatural silence. For a full minute I didn't breathe. When the lights finally flickered back on, I saw something written on the inside of the office door, in black grease. You looked away. There was another Polaroid taped below it, this one taken from inside the office. It showed me sitting exactly where I was right now, except behind me, standing in the doorway, was the man in the raincoat. That's when the police finally arrived. They found me crouched under the desk, clutching the photo. They searched the whole building. No one was there. No footprints, no fingerprints, no sign of forced entry. But they did find something behind the counter that I hadn't noticed before. A wallet, soaked and half burnt, with a faded driver's license inside. The name on it matched the man who'd come in earlier that night. Only problem? He'd died in a car crash on that same highway 3 years earlier. The police confirmed it. Even showed me the old report. The crash happened just past exit 46. He'd hit a deer and flipped his car into a ditch. They told me I must have imagined the whole thing. But they couldn't explain the Polaroids. I quit the next day. Didn't even go back to pick up my last paycheck. Sometimes, though, when I'm driving late at night, I still see that old gas station off the side of the road. It's been shut down for years now, boarded up, the sign half broken. But once in a while, if you drive by slow enough, you'll notice something strange. The neon open sign still flickers on for a second. And if you look through the window, there's a man inside, standing behind the counter, staring at the door. People say it's just a reflection, but every time I see it, the man in the window looks exactly like me. I've worked as a wildlife photographer for almost a decade. I've camped in deserts, frozen my hands in the Rockies, and spent weeks alone in the woods waiting for a single shot. I've seen wolves hunt, bears fight, and storms tear through valleys, but nothing has ever scared me more than what I saw last October, because some things out there in the dark watch you back. Last year, the National Forestry Department hired me to document animal migration patterns in the northern Pennsylvania woodlands. It was supposed to be a 2-week solo assignment. Camp deep in the forest, track movement, collect camera footage, and return. I arrived on October 10th in the start of the cold season, when the forest feels both alive and dying at once. The leaves were orange and gold, the air heavy with the smell of pine and decay. I hiked about 6 miles from the nearest dirt road and set up camp near a stream. The first few nights were quiet, just the rustle of animals and the distant howls of coyotes. Then, on the 4th night, something changed. It started with sound. Around midnight, I heard what I thought was footsteps outside my tent, slow, deliberate human footsteps. I froze, holding my breath, waiting for them to pass. But they didn't. They stopped just outside the fabric wall. Then a low voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." My blood went cold. I didn't move, didn't speak. After a few seconds, the sound of breathing, deep and ragged, filled the silence. Then I was gone. I stayed awake until dawn, clutching my flashlight like a weapon. In the morning, I went outside to check. There were footprints in the mud, bare footprints, human, adult-sized. They circled my tent twice before heading back into the trees. I tried to convince myself it was a lost hiker, maybe drunk or delusional. But the tracks led away from the trail, deeper into the forest where no sane person would wander barefoot. I decided to move my camp a few miles south, closer to one of the motion-triggered cameras I'd placed earlier in the week. That was my first mistake. By the 6th night, I started hearing it again, but not footsteps this time. Whistling, soft, tuneless whistling that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, sometimes near the creek, sometimes right behind the tent. Every time I stepped outside to check, it stopped. I left my audio recorder running that night, hidden just outside. When I played it back the next morning, I heard the whistling again, followed by something else. A second voice, distant but clear, "Don't let him see you." On the 7th day, I found my first camera torn from a tree, ripped down and smashed like someone had hit it with a rock. The SD card was missing. The bark around the trunk was scarred with strange scratch marks, long and uneven, like someone had dragged their nails across it over and over. By this point, I was done. I decided to leave early the next morning. But before I packed, I wanted to check one last camera, the one furthest north near the edge of a ravine. The hike took most of the afternoon. When I got there, the light was fading fast. The camera was still attached, but something was off. There was a second camera mounted beside it, not mine. An old model, weathered and rusted, aimed in the opposite direction, directly at the path I'd just walked. I pulled the memory card from my camera first. The data was fine. Then I opened the second camera. It still had power somehow, the small red LED blinking. I took its card too, figuring I'd check it later. As I was leaving, I noticed something carved into the tree beneath both cameras. "We see you." I hiked back in silence, every twig snap sounding like a gunshot. When I reached camp, darkness had already fallen. That night, the whistling didn't stop. It circled the tent over and over, sometimes close enough that I could hear breathing, shallow, rapid, almost excited. I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning. When the sun finally rose, I packed everything fast and started hiking out. My GPS showed I was on track toward the trailhead, but after an hour, I realized something terrifying. I was walking in circles. No matter which direction I went, I kept ending up near the same fallen tree, with a crooked branch that looked like a pointing finger. I marked it with tape, turned my compass, and kept walking. 2 hours later, there it was again. By the 3rd time, I found something new beside it, a small wooden figure propped against the trunk. It was crudely carved to look like a human, with hollow eyes and a slash where the mouth should be, and tied around its neck was my missing SD card. I took the figure and card, shoved them into my bag, and ran. At some point, I tripped and rolled down a hill, landing hard against a log. My ankle throbbed, but I didn't stop until I saw daylight through the trees. The highway. I practically crawled to the ranger station a few miles up. They thought I was delirious, probably dehydrated, maybe hallucinating. But when I gave them the SD cards, they agreed to look. A week later, a ranger named Marcus called me back. He sounded shaken. He said most of the footage was normal: deer, raccoons, night movement, until the last night. At 3:17 a.m., one of my cameras picked up something standing just inside the tree line. At first glance it looked human: tall, thin, pale skin, long hair. But its arms hung too low, almost reaching its knees. It stood motionless for about 2 minutes, then turned toward the camera. Marcus paused on the call. It smiled, he said quietly, and then it waved. The footage cut out right after that. I asked about the other card, the one from the old camera I'd found. He hesitated before answering. That footage was older, dated 1999, but it shows the same area, same tree, and whoever filmed it looked like they were watching someone else. You can hear heavy breathing, like they're hiding. Then at one point they whisper. He stopped. I could hear his breathing over the line. They whisper your name. I told him it was impossible, that I hadn't even been born when that footage was supposedly shot. He agreed it made no sense, but he said something else that made my blood run cold. We went back to the spot yesterday. The cameras, the carvings, the figures, gone. But we found footprints, bare ones, fresh. He sent me a screenshot from the footage before it cut out. A blurry still of the figure standing near the tree. The resolution was bad, but when I looked closely, I realized something that made my stomach twist. The figure wasn't just standing near my tent. It was standing behind me. You could see the back of my jacket, my camera tripod, and that pale, smiling face just a few feet away. That was the last time I ever took a solo assignment. I moved out of state not long after, started working studio jobs instead. But sometimes when I'm editing footage late at night, I catch a flicker in the corner of the frame. A pale blur, a shape just behind the trees, and every October, without fail, someone leaves a small wooden figure on my doorstep. Same hollow eyes, same cut mouth, and always facing the woods.